Greetings, awesome Blood Angels players. Here's to a great 2022. Today we're going to be asking why Chainfist Terminators. Let's get straight into it. In a recent GT, you'll know that I finished in the top 5, and I did include these Chainfist Terminators, which a lot of people are surprised about. Most people want to see more Sanguinary Guard or even Assault Terminators, so I wanted to talk in a post-tournament world what I felt about the Chainfist Terminators, why I picked them, and how sometimes you can pick something that's not totally in the meta if there's a distinct reason for doing so and they add value to your army list. So why Chainfist Terminators and why do I like them? Well, there's a few things to talk about. In turn 2, if they charge, you're going to get 12 attacks out of those Chainfists. If it is turn 3 or more, you're going to get 16 attacks. That includes, the bonus attacks you're going to get from Savage Echoes. The -1 to hit that the Chainfists suffer can be easily negated with Fury of the First for 1 CP, which is a stratagem that the Terminators can use when they charge to give them +1 to hit. So there's 16 attacks hitting on 3s. So basically, if you're in turn 2, you're hitting about 8 times. If you're in turn 3, you're hitting about 11 or 12 times. Now, this is a strength 8 hit with +1 to wound. You are on -4 EP, -5 AP if it's in turn 3 and onwards. And it's a D3 damage attack with a flat 3 damage against vehicles. So Terminators contain the core keywords. They can be dropped in near Chapter Masters or other characters to gain rerolls, and D3 damage is actually much stronger against armies that are -1 damage. If you think about it this way, D3 over a flat 2 damage. So when you roll for your damage on a D3, a roll of 1 to 4 will still result in 1 damage, because a roll of 1 or 2 is 1, which won't be negated. A roll of 3 or 4 is 2, which is -1, so it will still be 1. But a roll of 5 or 6 is essentially going to be 2 damage. So what that means is if you hit an enemy that is -1 damage with a D3 weapon, you're going to do 33% more damage than a flat 2 damage weapon. And as a Blood Angels player, Sanguinary Guard are like go-to units in terms of raw damage output, and a lot of people run multiple squads of Sanguinary Guard, but -1 damage is kind of like a hard counter against their Incarnate swords, right? So Chainfists are obviously going to do very well against here, and there's a few other situations and options and models that Chainfists are going to do really well in, and that's why I picked them. So we're going to talk about all the different options, and I'm going to do some Mathhammer. I'm going to break down just exactly how much damage Chainfists will do, and we'll compare them to those squads of Sanguinary Guard of equal points, and we'll maybe throw in some Lightning Claws, and we'll throw in the Thunderhammers as well, so you can actually get a picture of are Chainfists any good, and why I felt like they added quite a bit of value and utility to my army list. So I'm going to throw up a slide now that shows basically the points costs for like 7 different key melee units that you might include in your Blood Angels army list. And these would be your Vanguard Veterans with Lightning Claws and Storm Shields, which are very popular at the moment. It also includes Sanguinary Guard, and in this case I've taken Incarnate Axes because I feel like the Axes are kind of slightly stronger. We're also looking at Death Company Marines, and because Death Companies can take the Thunderhammers, which is 3 damage, and the main reason to take the Chainfists is to negate sort of that -1 damage enemies that are going to cause us problems. If we are going to take Terminators, there's going to be 3 choices. There's going to be those Assault Terminators with Thunderhammers and Storm Shields. There's going to be Relic Terminators that can take like Storm Bolters and Lightning Claws. And there's also going to be our Chainfist Terminators with the Sergeant with the Power Sword, which is what I took. And also, Primaris-wise, you do have those Blade Guard Veterans, which are essentially Sanguinary Guard without a jump pack, right? And an extra wound, I guess. Like, Blade Guard Veterans for 35 points, I think, are very survivable. Just the one problem with them is, all the other units on this list can essentially deep strike, Blade Guard Veterans cannot. And I've also put down the number of wounds that each of these squads would have and their armor saves, just so we can get sort of a broad picture. So why would you ever include Chainfist Terminators over jump assault infantry units? And we know that Vanguard Vets, Death Company, Sanguinary Guard are all great units, and I've done various videos on these and I will put them up above. And while it is important to always be prepared to be charging, durable units can accomplish other tasks and can be equally important, and this is where these Terminators come in. If you think about the current meta, you've got some insane pressure orc lists, and they come with a ton of Ramshackle, and Ramshackle, if you're not familiar, is -1 damage if the weapon is less than strength 8, and that can be a real problem for Sanguinary Guard. Again, I talk about how they can lose 50% of their damage against -1, so that's important. We also have huge amounts of firepower coming out of blobs of Admech, Skitarii, Vanguard and Rangers and stuff, and sometimes having a unit that can basically be on a 1-up save and cover, which Terminators are, that can just wither some firepower, is also very important. There's various lists now that include dangerous 2 damage weapons, 3 Plague Burst Crawlers, potentially spring to mind with the indirect fire. Also, Orc Rucker Truck buggies are insanely good at killing 2 wound Marines. So having Marines with 3 wounds can actually make quite a big difference. It essentially almost doubles their survivability against those 2 damage weapons. And also we have tons of mortals in the current meta. Every new codex, every current codex, it feels like, is just spitting out mortal wounds. So again, having a model that's the same points with an additional wound, providing a bit more survivability when you have to hold objectives or complete secondaries and stuff like that, can actually be kind of important. Scoring is obviously one of the most important parts of the game, and I actually kind of like the fact that these teleport homers for just 5 points are actually able to let you deep strike twice with this unit of Terminators. So if they do arrive perhaps in turn 2, they shoot their Stormbolters at -1 AP because of the tactical doctrine. They then make a charge and delete an enemy unit. You then have the option of removing them from the board and bringing them back in a future turn to basically rinse and repeat. And whatever you end up charging with for Chainfists, if it's vehicles or even if it's regular models, the D3 damage or the flat 3 against vehicles from these Chainfists will do significant work. So yeah, we're going to talk about the Mathhammer in a minute. And in the tournament that I played in, I found these Terminators kind of both reactive, aggressive, and also as a scoring unit. What I do think about Terminators is they are very slow. So I think you can end up with them stuck in a quarter of the board, and I think this is why the 5 points for the teleport homer is so valuable, because it's one way to counter their slowness. So I wouldn't recommend going all Terminators, but I think in a Blood Angels list that has a lot of other fast moving units, I absolutely think a squad of Terminators can do work, and for me they did perform pretty well throughout the tournament. So now let's get into some maths, and what I've done is we're looking at those -1 damage enemies, and I've taken the 6 units that we had earlier, the key Blood Angels units, and I've worked out just how many attacks you get from each of these units in turn 3 when Savage Echoes is active and you've made a charge, and then I've worked out the number of points of damage that they do across the board against every type of enemy. Now if this wasn't -1 damage, then your Sanguinary Guard would actually perform really well, but of course they're at 50% damage. Now as we look down this list at the bottom, the 2 mentions, the Rucker Trucks and the Death Copters, are in green because they're -1 damage against like the Sanguinary Guard and the Vanguard Veterans and the Blade Guards, because they're not hitting them with Strength 8, but the Chainfists and the Thunderhammers are hitting at Strength 8, so they don't have to take in the -1 damage. Now I knew at this tournament there was going to be strong Death Guard presence. There's also going to be, 2 or 3 really strong Orc lists, and as well as there's also going to be a bunch of AdMech lists. So if we talk about the AdMech, I already talked about trying to survive, and the Terminators I think in cover and potentially getting dropped down in the centre of the board for Oath of Moment points are very good. But if we talk about Orcs, so Sanguinary Guard, if we ran a squad of Sanguinary Guard, this is 6 Sanguinary Guard with axes into a squad of, let's say, 3 Rucker Trucks. They're only going to do 13 wounds. They're going to kill 1 Rucker Truck and maybe take 4 wounds off the second one, maybe 5 if they're lucky. At that point, those Rucker Trucks are probably just going to fall out of combat and you're going to lose the entire Sanguinary Guard, right? That is how that is going to play out. I don't suppose anyone is running squads of 10 Sanguinary Guard, and even if you're running 10, you're not going to wipe a squad of Rucker Trucks in a single turn, which in itself can be problematic. And remember, this is not just Rucker Trucks, this is like the Scrap Jets, and I've also got Death Copters down there on the slides. So let's look at those 4 Chainfist Terminators. So this is just 4. Remember, we do have a Sergeant with a Power Sword as well who can potentially do chip damage, and we also have 20 Stormbolter shots that can come out beforehand which could also do chip damage. If we drop down a squad of Terminators to charge a squad of Rucker Trucks, you can see that the Chainfists will do 20 damage to them. So that would be 2 dead Rucker Trucks, 1 left, for example. But if we paid the 1 CP for Fury of the First, and that is what is in orange there, then we do 26.67 damage. So these 3 Rucker Trucks would have 27 wounds, so you're pretty much almost guaranteed to wipe the squad just with the Terminator Chainfists. So you also then going to have your Sergeant coming in with this Power Sword. He's going to get like 5 attacks in turn 3. You're also going to maybe have some chip damage from the Stormbolters, or you could do a little bit of chip damage from other like less important firepower in your army list. So one of the reasons that I took Chainfist Terminators was because I knew that there was going to be 2 or 3 orc lists that had a lot of orc vehicles, and I feel like orc vehicles are in a very strong place. And this unit was designed to basically deal with that, and you can see here that they do deal with it, and they do deal with it very well. But if we look at some other problematic units, for example Contemptor Dreadnoughts, you run 6 Sanguinary Guard into Contemptor Dreadnought, you end up doing 7 wounds because of the -1 damage and the invuln. It's not very impressive. You run your Terminator Chainfists in, you do 8.89, so arguably without spending the CP, you pretty much almost guaranteed to kill the Contemptor. If you do spend that CP, then those 4 Chainfist Terminators will kill the Contemptor, almost guaranteed. And then obviously, once again, I've not included the Power Sword, which the Sergeant for the Chainfist Terminators has. So that's pretty good as well. And then Plague Burst Crawlers. Plague Burst Crawlers are toughness 8, and you know, if you run up against a list that's got 3 Plague Burst Crawlers and they play them very defensively, it can be difficult to get to them. So when you get to them, you really need to do enough damage to take them out. Sanguinary Guard, and I've also run Blade Guard Veterans into Plague Burst Crawlers, and the results personally have been very underwhelming. And you can see here, 5 Blade Guard Veterans into a Plague Burst Crawler do 5 or 6 wounds out of 26 attacks. Same with the Sanguinary Guard, getting 30 attacks. They're doing like 6.8 damage to Plague Burst Crawler. It's kind of poor. The Chainfist Terminators here can potentially do 9.48. I mean, it's still not enough to kill it, but I think with a little bit of firepower from elsewhere, or maybe those Stormbolter shots, or maybe the Power Sword, those Chainfist Terminators are just... They're obviously a niche unit. They're not going to be good against everybody, but I think if you have a distinct plan around them, I find them quite interesting. And one of the things that I love about them is they are the old 2nd edition models, and who doesn't love those old Terminators and would like to see them have a place on the board more often. Now, if you want to pause the video and look at this in a little bit more detail, I guess there would be an argument that Thunderhammer Death Company can kind of do this just as well, if not better, or Thunderhammer Assault Marines can do this as well, again, just the same, if not better. But, I mean, Thunderhammer Assault Marines are more expensive. I believe it's 20 more points, and you lose those 20 Stormbolter shots. And I quite like the Stormbolter shots in terms of... It's a little bit of clear against chaff units, right? And also, sometimes in my games, I wanted to just drop the Terminators down right in the centre of the board and score me oath the moment points. And if they were just close combat Terminators, then there would be no firepower coming out from them. So this was a way that I could have them in the middle of the board, and they could throw out a little bit of chip damage here or there. And do you know what? Against toughness 3 enemies, which there are a lot of in the meta, like Dukari, I played against a Tempest Scion list, Astra Militarum that was toughness 3, and then also Sisters of Battle. Those Stormbolters aren't bad at all. Remember again, you can pay 1 CP for Fury of the First to make them hit on 2s if you want, and they are core. And there is also the ability to off-spec scan here with the Stormbolters. Then finally, if you think about the Teleport Homer being able to redeploy to another section of the board in terms of maybe perform an action, or get on another objective, or score some points, then I think there's value in this Teleport Homer for 5 points. If you think about the Teleport Homer for 5 points, it costs you 1 CP to do a Guerrilla Tactics, or it costs you 1 CP to do Up on Wings of Fire. So 5 points for the Teleport Homer is kind of a no-brainer in how cheap it is. If you could pay 5 points for doing like another CP action, you'd probably do that all day long. 5 points to gain a CP seems very, very reasonable. So, plus I think a lot of people weren't 100% familiar with the Teleport Homer rules, because people that I played against at the tournament kind of felt that the Teleport Homer rules were still from last edition, and I was like, no, the Teleport Homer rules have changed, so I can remove my models from the board after they've deep striked in and deep strike again. And I think that can actually catch people out, and if you can do what I said, if you can bring them in turn 2, you can get 20 Stormbolter shots at -1 AP, you can make a charge, you can pay 1 CP to basically have them delete, like, in the case of the Orc Buggies, I was able to delete like an entire squad of Rucka Trucks, consolidate into cover so they're on a 1-up save, and then remove them from the board next turn to rinse and repeat the same action. This is actually a really strong play, and I guess some enemies may have a little bit of fear, and you know, try and screen out their backfield a little bit better the second time round, because they were like, wow, those Terminators came in, they did a ton of work, and they're coming in again. And overall, I kind of liked them. There's some definite thoughts here around what I was expecting to play and what I'd seen in the meta, and before I went to the tournament I played like a bunch of orc lists that had a lot of vehicles, and I felt like without the Terminators I would actually just really struggle, and against rocket trucks that are deleting infantry models because of their 2 damage weapons, then the Terminators again are more survivable. So this was an interesting choice for me. I overall thought it was reasonably good. It was nice to bring the models into the meta. Do I think I will keep them in my list? Potentially not. But I guess my whole point of this video was to try and prove that if there is something that you think can help fill a role and score you points and deal with a threat in the current meta or at a tournament in the current setting and the timeline, and I know that's always fluid, then sometimes I think you just need to think about it, try it, and then maybe push on and actually commit to it, because I don't think anyone else took Chainfist Terminators to this tournament. I don't think many Blood Angels players, period, took Chainfist Terminators this edition, but I used them and I was a whisker away from potentially getting like a top 2 finish at this tournament. I actually beat the guy that came second in the 4th game. So a tough result for me to swallow, but that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it makes you consider some units that you maybe not seen so much before. Look at the tournament winning list that just came out a couple of weeks ago, and I'll link it up here right now, in that Sam actually took 2 squads of Las Fusel Eliminators, which I guess is something else that we haven't seen many people run. But I think, you know, if you think about a unit, if you have a defined purpose of how you're going to run it, if you know what you're going to have to deal with in the meta, and you're ready for that, and you've tested it, and you've played it, and you're familiar with it, then I think it just kind of shows that there are a lot of sort of units that are just on the edge that can make interesting army lists, or different army lists, from the status quo. As always, thank you so much for being here and watching. I really appreciate the support. If you would like to see more, then you can obviously subscribe, and if you did get some value out of the video, I'd love it if you would hit that like button. If you want to support the channel in any way, shape or form, just know it is super appreciated. There's various links in all of my video descriptions. So I wish you all the best for 2022. We are going to be back to a bit more of regular streaming sessions, with a live game coming up on Death Guard just a couple of days. Thank you so much for all the support. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you guys all in the live chat and Discord and that sort of thing very soon. By the blood are we made strong, brothers. Peace.